Return the money or don't come home. That was my father's voice, not a question. A sentence. The storm outside echoed the chaos in my head. Thunder cracked like bones, snapping in cold fury as I stared at my phone, still glowing with the remnants of that call. His words hadn't come with room for negotiation. They had arrived like a verdict, final cutting, irreversible. I had always been the outsider in my own family, but this was exile. And for what? For something I didn't do. I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my Charleston apartment, still in my work blouse, rainlight warping shadows across the wooden floor. The scent of burnt coffee lingered from hours ago. My fingers trembled as I opened my email app, searching for anything that could explain what the hell just happened. Nothing. No bank notifications. No withdrawal alerts. No activity logs. And yet my father had spoken with the authority of a man clutching undeniable evidence, as if a missing $60,000 had my fingerprints on it. Earlier that evening, the call had come in at 6:12 p.m., sharp Gerald style. Direct, efficient, cruel. I hadn't even had the chance to say hello before his voice struck me like ice. You accessed your mother's trust fund. Don't bother denying it. My heart thudded. Dad, I don't even have login access. Save it. In the background, I could hear Vanessa's soft sobbing. She emptied it, Daddy, she said between crocodile tears. I just don't understand why. Then came Brandon's voice, barely audible. Maybe there's some mistake, but his uncertainty didn't matter. Gerald had decided. You have until Thanksgiving. Return the full amount. Otherwise, don't show your face here again. The call ended, just like that. No trial, no proof. Just execution. I pressed both palms to my temples, breathing in shallow, erratic gasps. There had to be some explanation. Maybe the bank had been hacked. Maybe Mom made a transfer and forgot. Maybe Vanessa had access. And no, that wasn't a maybe. Vanessa had always known the passwords. She'd been Mom's golden shadow, always hovering, always helping, always logging in just to check on things. The sobbing in the background hadn't been grief. It was theater. And Gerald had eaten it up. I sprang from the bed pacing. My laptop was already open on the dining table. I launched into my digital archive bills emails folders. Where was the shared folder Mom had set up with me years ago? The one she labeled estate planning. Elaine. It had every document, password, note, scanned file. It was gone. Not moved, not renamed, deleted. My chest tightened. Sweat beaded at my temple. And then came the chill, not from the storm, but the unmistakable knowledge that I'd been framed. Deliberately, carefully, with intent to exile. I closed the laptop and stood frozen in the quiet hum of my apartment. The world outside roared with rain, but in here, silence reigned. Not the peaceful kind. No, this was the silence that screamed. The kind that reminded you just how alone you really were. I had never belonged, not really. Not since Mom passed and Vanessa stepped into her lace-lined shoes with that smirk no one else seemed to notice. Gerald had always been cold, but now his ice had turned lethal. And Brandon? He watched like a spectator who didn't know if the game was rigged or if he just didn't want to pick a side. I sank back onto the edge of the bed, staring at the phone. I could call, beg, plead, try to reason with a man who didn't care if I had proof or not. But a whisper slipped past my lips before I could catch it. If they want war, I'll bring truth. They always said I was too independent. Now I realized they meant disposable. The sky outside my apartment still wore bruises from last night's storm. Raindrops clung to the glass like they were too tired to fall, and the gray morning pressed against my windows like a held breath. I hadn't slept. The coffee I microwaved for the third time tasted like rust and regret, but I drank it anyway. My phone was silent. I'd called Gerald 4 times straight to voicemail every time. His silence wasn't accidental. It was a verdict. I opened the old thread with Mom scrolling past the emojis and daffodil photos she always sent me down to a single message from mid-October. I hadn't paid attention to before. Updating everything soon. You'll be okay no matter what. What had she meant by that? My chest tightened. I remembered a birthday lunch the spring before she passed at that tiny seafood place by the harbor. She looked pale, her hand trembling slightly as she pushed a slice of lemon cake toward me. She leaned in, eyes serious. If you ever feel like the black sheep remember, it's because your wool is real. I laughed then. I thought she was being poetic. But now I wasn't so sure. Something was wrong. Something had always been wrong. I pulled out the bottom drawer of my vanity. Nestled beneath an old silk scarf was the velvet jewelry box I hadn't touched since the funeral. Inside was Mom's opal pendant and a flash drive. It was labeled in her handwriting, Nov 2023. Underneath a sticky note, folded and faded, use if needed. My fingers trembled as I plugged the drive into my laptop. Password protected, encrypted. No clue what she wanted me to see. No hint. Just silence. I called the bank. Hi, I'm Claire Cole, daughter of Elaine Cole. I'd like to confirm my status on her trust fund. The woman on the line sounded polite but clinical. One moment, the sound of clicking keys filled the space between us. Then I'm sorry, Ms. Cole, but you're not listed as a trustee or beneficiary on any of the documents we have. The only authorized parties are Gerald Cole and Vanessa Meyer. There was a ringing in my ears. That's not possible. She told me she was making changes. I'm sorry. There's nothing further I can disclose. The line went dead. I stared at the wall. Numb. Not listed. Not named. Not trusted. Like I'd been erased from my own mother's legacy. My phone buzzed again. Brandon. Just don't make this worse. Okay? Make what worse? The lie they'd orchestrated. The crime they were pinning on me. I stood heart racing and paced the length of my apartment. I opened drawers, hoping for anything. An old letter, a voice memo, a hidden document. But it was useless. The flash drive sat on the counter like a silent sentinel, guarding whatever truths Mom had tucked inside. I paused in the doorway to the kitchen, one hand braced against the frame. Maybe Mom hadn't trusted Vanessa. Maybe she hadn't even trusted Gerald. But had she trusted me? And if so, why wasn't I included? I sank into a chair, the weight of absence pressing against my chest. It wasn't just about money. It was about being erased, silently, surgically, as if my place in the family had always been temporary, as if I had been tolerated, not loved. My mind drifted to Adam, my ex, who once told me I was too strong to need anyone right before he packed up his things and left without a backward glance. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd built my walls too high, kept my distance too well. Maybe independence had been my armor and my isolation. But this wasn't strength. This was abandonment disguised as resilience. I picked up the flash drive again, running my thumb over Mom's handwriting. Familiar loops, always a little slanted to the right. If she left this for me, it meant something. Even if everyone else had turned away, she had tried somehow, in her quiet way, to leave me a thread to follow. In a voice I barely recognized, I whispered, "What were you trying to protect, Mom?" They said Thanksgiving was a family matter. I used to be part of that now. The message came quietly, like most betrayals do. I was waiting in line at the grocery store, watching a toddler scream over a dropped candy bar, when my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and opened the family group chat out of habit. Or maybe hope. Error. You are no longer part of this conversation. That was it. No explanation, no warning. 1 minute I was in the next, cut out like a thread snipped from an heirloom quilt. I stared at the screen, blinking until the cashier cleared her throat. "Ma'am?" I blinked at her. "Sorry," I muttered, placing my groceries on the belt, a single frozen turkey breast boxed, stuffing a can of cranberry jelly I didn't even like. Just enough to pretend I wasn't alone. Just enough to trick myself into believing this year wouldn't feel like an empty chair. Outside, the sky was a pale, reluctant blue, the kind that tries to be cheerful, but never quite makes it. Decorations were already up. Plastic cornucopias in window displays, cheerful wreaths hung on storefront doors. Children ran past me in scarves and oversized mittens. I used to love this time of year. Not anymore. I parked at home and sat in the car engine, idling, scrolling through Vanessa's latest post. There, it was a photo of the dining room table perfectly set with cream linens, tall candles, and gold-trimmed plates. The caption read, "This year's centerpiece, peace, peace," as if banishment was harmony, as if removing me restored some sacred balance. I played her video. She panned slowly across the room, her voice in the background, describing the intentionality of healing energy or some other pseudo-spiritual nonsense. Gerald sat stiffly in the corner, polishing wine glasses. Brandon was half visible, placing napkin rings like a hotel intern. He didn't look up. I hit record on a voicemail to him. "Tell me the truth. Did Mom's signature even match, her handwriting as well as I do? You used to trace it in cards when you were a kid. You taught me how to forge Dad's signature for permission slips. Remember? Don't play dumb now." I ended the message before my voice cracked. Inside my apartment, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor and pulled out a worn tin from my bookshelf. It held the past in layers, a Polaroid of me and Mom baking sugar cookies, a ticket stub from a concert she took me to when I turned 18, and a tiny ceramic angel she gave me after my appendix surgery. Beneath it all, a folded birthday card with her unmistakable writing. I opened it, brushing my thumb across the underlined words. "You are not an accident, Claire. You are my intention." She used to say the strangest things, proverbs disguised as comfort. I remembered her once laughing softly over a cup of mulled wine and saying, "Holidays reveal who loves you and who performs you." I hadn't understood it then. Now it felt like prophecy. I stared around the apartment. It wasn't just the absence of family. It was the presence of silence. No voices, no clinking dishes, just the hum of the refrigerator and the ache behind my ribs. I booted up the laptop. The flash drive's faint blue light blinked in anticipation. I plugged it in, took a breath, and tried again. Wool is real. No. Elaine 123. Still no. Then I typed "not an accident." Click. The screen flickered. A folder appeared, "In case I'm gone." My fingers hovered. I clicked. 2 files. Final thoughts and revised. Will. October 2023. The document was locked, preview blurred, but I could see the header. My name was there. A chill moved down my spine. It wasn't about inheritance. It was about being believed. About Mom seeing through the theater and trusting me to find the truth. My phone buzzed again. Brandon. A thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else? No words. No courage. No spine. I stared at it. Rage swelled sharp and bright. It clawed at my throat like a scream that had waited too long to be voiced. If he wouldn't stand up for the truth, I would. I opened a new message. Typed slowly, deliberately, "If you don't tell the truth, I will." Truth doesn't vanish. It gets buried under lies, ink, and silence. The sky was the color of wet ash as I parked outside the county recorder's office. A cold drizzle pattered against the windshield. Each drop a small drumbeat of dread. I sat there for a moment, clutching my tote bag, fingers wrapped tightly around the flash drive inside. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried a corpse no one wanted to exhume. Inside the building smelled like dust and printer toner. Rows of desks, worn carpet, and people shuffling papers as if they weren't unraveling someone's life. I stepped up to the front desk, where an older woman with weary eyes and a Mrs. Warren nameplate glanced up. "I need a record search," I said, voice steady. "For anything recently filed under the name Elaine Cole." Mrs. Warren blinked slowly. "Date range." "Last 30 days." She passed on. "October 28th. There was a pause. She didn't ask how or why. She just tapped her keyboard with the precision of someone who'd seen too many grieving relatives to ask questions. After a few clicks, she frowned. There's a document filed November 2nd. It's a preliminary probate packet submitted by She Peered Closer. Gerald Cole. Of course it was. Can I see it? She printed a partial copy, just enough to confirm legitimacy. I took the pages to the side desk and laid them out like pieces of a map. My fingers hovered over the last page. There it was, Elaine's signature. Or what they claimed was her signature. I stared at it for a long moment. It didn't look right. Elaine had always signed her name with her middle initial, Elaine M. Cole, with a particular flourish on the M that I used to mimic as a child. But this was flat, rushed, like someone trying to remember what her signature looked like from memory. Below it, a notarization stamp marked Delaney Notary Public. I didn't know the name, but something about it scratched at the edges of my attention. I flipped through the other pages and took photos. Each click of my phone camera felt like a rebellion, documenting what they wanted. Hidden. A record of the record. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I answered anyway. "Stop this," Gerald's voice said low and hard. "Don't dig, Claire. This ends now." I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel it, the weight of my suspicion, the shift in air. I wanted him to squirm. "Then you shouldn't have buried anything," I said, and hung up. I pulled out a worn folder from my tote and laid it beside the probate papers. Inside were old hospital forms, consent signatures from when Elaine had her gallbladder removed the year before. I lined them up side by side. Even to an untrained eye, the difference screamed. Elaine's true signature was fluid, confident, slanted slightly upward as if reaching toward something. This new one, crooked, tighter, no middle initial. Forgery isn't just betrayal. It's illegal. I whispered it, barely audible even to myself. But in that whisper, something inside me settled. Not peace, but resolve. The drizzle had turned into a full-blown rainstorm by the time I stepped outside. The street shimmered with reflections of red brake lights and flickering signs. I walked slowly, coat unzipped, letting the rain soak into my hair and collar. It was the only baptism I was getting this year. Back home, I dried off and poured myself a glass of wine I didn't really want. I pulled up the notary registry and typed in Mark Delaney. A hit popped up, licensed in South Carolina office address on King Street. No photo, just a number. I saved it. My laptop pinged with an email from an address I didn't recognize. An estate law firm CC'd by the county. Attached was a formal notice of probate proceedings. Hearing scheduled December 12th. So it had begun. Officially, they wanted silence. I would give them clarity instead. I didn't need them to believe me. I needed Mom to speak for herself. The dawn crept in quietly, casting a pale blue glow across my bedroom. For once, the rain had stopped. Silence filled the air, but it wasn't peace. It was the eerie quiet that settles just before something ruptures. I lay still, not wanting to move, the edge of my blanket clutched in one hand and the other resting on the old jewelry box beside me, the one I hadn't opened since the funeral. Elaine's voice echoed in my memory. "If anything ever happens, look in the blue box." The words had been a throwaway comment once, a passing phrase in a voicemail I'd saved, only because her voice always comforted me. I sat up, pulling the box into my lap. My fingers were clumsy with hesitation as I opened the lid and sifted through old trinkets. Brooches, earrings I never wore, a faded photo of the two of us from my college graduation. Then I saw it. A small SD card, black and unmarked, except for a tiny sticker on the case. Blue! The kind of detail most people wouldn't notice, but Elaine knew I would. I got out of bed and crossed to my desk, plugging the card into my laptop. The screen flickered and a single file appeared. Voice, Nov 23 de M4A. My heart pounded as I double-clicked. There was a crackle of static and then her voice. "Claire, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, I suppose I didn't get to say goodbye." I covered my mouth with both hands. Her voice was soft, slower than I remembered, but steady, measured, like she had practiced. "Vanessa doesn't know the truth." "But you do," she said, "and I trust you to hold on to it." The lump in my throat swelled. My eyes burned, but I refused to blink. Gerald may be pressured. There are people around him who want control. If he fails to uphold my final wishes, I need you to know there is another copy. I left it with someone I trust, just in case. Her voice wavered on that last line. It wasn't fear, it was resignation, as if she already knew how this story would unfold. And Claire, she said, after a long pause, if they silence, you remember I raised a fighter. I broke. Tears streamed down without ceremony. I buried my face into the crook of my arm and let the sobs come, unfiltered, full-bodied grief. The kind I'd been too proud to show, too busy, proving I didn't need anyone. But I needed her. Not for inheritance or validation, but for her truth. And she had left it wrapped in her voice, buried in a memory card. My phone rang, slicing through the quiet. Brandon. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Part of me wanted to let it ring out. But then I answered. Hey, I said, voice hoarse. He didn't say much, just breathed on the other end, waiting. Maybe for me to yell, maybe for me to hang up. I found something, I said. It's from her. Still no reply. I'm sending it. You should hear it. All of it. A few minutes later, I forwarded the file. I watched the progress bar climb slowly, like it had weight. My phone buzzed again. A text. Brandon. I didn't know this existed. I stared at the message for a long time. Simple. Neutral. But something had shifted. No denial. No deflection. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing, "Me, you still think I'm the thief." I hit send and set the phone down. The room was bright now, the sky outside clean and open. For the first time in days, I felt something like direction, not certainty, not closure, but movement. The kind that comes when a door you didn't know existed finally creaks open. Elaine's voice still lingered in the room. Not loud, just present. A reminder that I wasn't wrong. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. You have 10 days to return the money or face legal action. They wanted fear. They got fuel. The letter came sandwiched between a pizza coupon and an overdue water bill. Claire had been sorting through a pile of unopened mail on her kitchen counter, mindlessly tossing most of it aside. But the crisp envelope, white thick, embossed with a law firm logo, made her stomach knot the moment her fingers brushed it. She slid it open with a butter knife. Her breath caught. The words were clean, brutal. You are hereby given formal notice. Misappropriation of $60,000 from the Elaine T. Cole Trust. Civil restitution and potential criminal proceedings. 10 days to respond. 10 days. 10. She sat on the edge of her couch letter, trembling in her hands. She didn't remember leaning forward, but now her elbows were on her knees, the letter bent under the pressure of her grip. The last time she heard from her father, it had been a command. Now, he'd lawyered up. Her phone buzzed. Brandon. Brandon. I didn't know they were taking it this far. Claire stared at his message for a long time, so he knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the depth of it, but enough to feel guilty. She typed, "You didn't stop them either. Deleted it." Typed again. When did loyalty start meaning silence? Deleted that too. Instead, she just replied, "It's already too far." Her hands were still shaking as she pulled out her laptop. She typed Mark Delaney Notary, Charleston, SC into the search bar. The name had stuck with her, printed in tidy letters under the forged will. She hadn't known it then, but she would remember it now. There he was, licensed, active. Notarized a handful of documents in the past month, all routine, but then she spotted it October 28th, personal estate transfer. Cole Elaine T. It wasn't a smoking gun, not yet, but it was something. Claire opened her email, typed his name into the to field. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't want to come across as unhinged or desperate. Instead, she wrote, "Dear Mr. Delaney, I'm reaching out regarding a will you notarized on October 28th for Elaine T. Cole. I believe you were listed as a notary on that document. I'd like to verify the circumstances surrounding the signing. Please let me know if we can speak. Claire Cole. She stared at the email, then closed her laptop without sending it. Not yet. She needed to be sure. She needed to feel ready to light this match. The rain began again. It hadn't stopped all week, just paused occasionally to pretend it might. Her phone buzzed. Brandon. If you provoke him, Dad will burn it all down. Claire read the message once, then twice. She thought about her mother's voice, how it used to say things like, "Never corner a snake unless you're ready to be bitten." But Claire wasn't cornered. Not anymore. She walked to the bathroom, stared at herself in the mirror. Her hair was tangled, eyes shadowed, shoulders tight. But behind that exhaustion, something else stirred resolve. Then I'll burn with the truth in hand. She opened her laptop again, read the email one last time. Click. Send. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers on a forgotten tape. The parking lot behind the cafe was nearly empty, save for the occasional flicker of brake lights disappearing into the cold night. Rain tapped against the windshield like secrets trying to get in. I pulled my hood over my head and approached the silver Honda, where Brandon sat waiting. The windows fogged from the inside. The engine hummed, but the tension between us buzzed louder. He didn't smile when I opened the passenger door, just reached across to unlock it, then stared ahead, eyes fixed on the dashboard like it might offer a way out. "This feels dramatic, even for us," I said, easing in. He nodded once. "Just figured it's safer than texting." The heater blew warm air across the cabin, but it couldn't thaw what hung between us. I waited. Brandon didn't speak right away. Instead, he pulled a small USB drive from his coat pocket and held it out like it weighed more than it should. "Don't ask how I got it," he said. "Just listen. I didn't take it right away. Is this about Mom?" "No, it's about them." That got my attention. I took the drive, turned it over between my fingers. "What's on it?" "A conversation. From a few days ago. Dad and Vanessa." A cold bloom spread across my spine. How my jacket records by default sometimes. I usually forget it's on. This time, I didn't delete it. We stared at each other. I could see it in his face, whatever I was about to hear. It wasn't minor. It wasn't a misunderstanding or family drama. It was evidence. I opened my laptop, balancing it on my knees as I plugged in the drive. The file popped up, Oct30 conversation. Wave. My hands hesitated above the keyboard. "You sure you want to hear this?" Brandon asked. "I can't unknee the truth just because it hurts." I clicked play. At first, nothing but rustling and the shuffle of feet. Then voices. Vanessa's sharp and brittle. She was never supposed to see that version of the will. Gerald replied, calm as ice. Then we say she forged it. She's always been unstable. My stomach turned. I reached instinctively for the window button, craving air I couldn't find. Vanessa's voice quieter now. "You said we'd clean this up." "Gerald, we will. No one will believe her, not after what we've planted." I paused the playback, staring at the timestamp. 2 days before the accusation. 2 days before they staged this entire circus. Brandon rubbed his palms on his jeans. "I didn't know it went that deep. I thought, maybe..." I don't know what I thought. I replayed it this time, letting the words cut where they needed to. She was never supposed to see that version. She's always been unstable, not after what we've planted. I closed my eyes. Every sentence was a nail in the coffin they'd prepared for me. My reputation, my name, my dignity. And yet, I was still breathing. "Why now?" I asked him. "Why give me this now?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the windshield where raindrops raced each other, like everything was trying to escape gravity. "Because I heard Mom's voice too," he said finally, "and it didn't sound like someone who trusted them." I nodded slowly, a tide rising inside me. There was more. The recording continued. "Vanessa. Let her scream all she wants. No one listens to the forgotten daughter." That line sat in the air like smoke. Brandon didn't meet my eyes, but I didn't need him to. I could feel it, the shame, the doubt, the slow-burning guilt of someone who had finally seen the crack in the mirror. I leaned forward, lowered the laptop lid, and slipped the USB into my coat pocket. My reflection in the dark window didn't look broken. It looked sharpened. "They'll listen now," I whispered. Brandon reached out hesitant and placed his hand over mine. And for once, he didn't pull away. "If they want a courtroom, I'll bring the autopsy of their lies." The rain tapped a dull rhythm against the window pane as I stepped into Cynthia Reyes's law office. The coat I wore was my mother's gray wool, one button missing near the cuff. I hadn't worn it in years, but today I needed her strength on my shoulders. Mark Delaney appeared on the screen in front of us. He looked older than I'd imagined, maybe late 50s, with kind eyes, but the fatigue of someone who'd seen too many lies unravel. Behind him, a bookshelf leaned slightly to the left, cluttered with folders and a dusty American flag. "I remember Elaine," he began, without greeting. October 21st. She was lucid, clear-headed, knew exactly what she wanted. Cynthia, seated beside me, gave him the barest nod. She had a presence that silenced chaos, not by force, but by gravity. Her desk was immaculate, just a single legal pad and a glass of water. "What did she say?" I asked, voice steady. Mark's eyes softened. "She said, they'll fight her. Make sure they lose." I closed my eyes, letting those words wrap around me like armor. "She signed a revised will?" Cynthia asked, tone clinical. "Yes. I notarized it myself." She insisted on a video recording, too. Said it wasn't trust she lacked, but insurance. Cynthia scribbled something quickly. Mark continued, "I mailed a copy to her house. She said she'd place the original in a separate file one she trusted would be found if things got ugly." "They got ugly," I muttered. Cynthia glanced at me. "The copy Gerald filed lacks both video and chain of custody." "I never saw the video," I added. "I'll send it over," Mark replied. "And Ms. Cole, your mother was fierce. She didn't fear being misunderstood. She feared being erased." He logged off and silence pooled in the room. Cynthia turned to me. "Now, let's discuss our next move." I pulled out the manila folder I had prepped the night before. Inside the USB, Brandon gave me the voicemail from my mother, a printed log of hospital consent forms with her authentic signatures, and the encrypted folder labeled, "In case I'm gone." She examined each item methodically. "You're building a mosaic," she said, nodding. "Good. But remember, courtrooms prefer photographs. We need clarity, not just implication." I sat forward. "Where do we begin?" "With burden of proof," she replied. "Forgery's hard to prove, but we'll subpoena. Digital metadata, compare signatures, and establish motive. Vanessa gets the bulk of the assets under the new version," I said. "Then we show that benefit," Cynthia replied, folding her hands. "And we use your mother's own voice to frame it. She named you executor in the video, yes." Cynthia allowed herself a small smile. "Let's subpoena the dead," starting with Elaine's voice. I exhaled slowly. The ache in my chest hadn't vanished, but for the first time, it didn't paralyze me. Instead, it pointed forward. I reached for my bag, zipped it closed, and stood. Let the war begin. They called me the problem, so I became one. The HR email came at 1:14 p.m., just as I was sorting invoices at my desk. The subject line, "Notice of Administrative Review," made my stomach twist. Inside, it was worse. Gerald's legal team had filed a preliminary fraud complaint, and my workplace had been CC'd. It was no longer just about inheritance or family honor. They were dragging me into the public square to burn. I clicked through the attached letter, my fingers cold. Legal jargon blurred across the screen. Misappropriation, questionable financial conduct, potential reputational risk. Then, the final line. "We trust the organization will conduct its own internal review as appropriate." As if on cue, HR pinged. "Claire, please report to conference room 4B for a brief meeting at 3:00 p.m. I texted Cynthia Reyes. "They've gone nuclear." She called instantly. "It's strategic, tactical humiliation, designed to isolate and pressure you. Don't blink." I tried to laugh, but the sound stuck in my throat. "They copied my workplace, Cynthia." "Who does that to their own daughter? Someone afraid of what she knows?" she said evenly. You're pushing the right buttons. They're retaliating. Outside, the sky was losing its patience. Rain turned to hard, stinging hail, tapping against the window like thrown stones. I closed the blinds, blocking out the world and their weapons. My phone buzzed again. Brandon. Third missed call in 2 hours. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened Instagram curiosity getting the better of me. Vanessa had posted a black and white selfie with a wine glass and the caption, "Bloodlines can't bleach betrayal." Dozens of likes, a few comments with emojis, one from a cousin, "You deserve peace." Another, "Some people just want drama." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. They were writing my character in real time, and I wasn't even in the room. At 2:59, I stood outside conference room 4B and inhaled. I adjusted the collar of my blazer, still slightly damp from the earlier walk. I reminded myself I had done nothing wrong. Inside, my manager, Greg, sat beside an HR rep named Lisa, who offered me a closed-mouth smile that screamed liability. "Claire," Greg began gently, "we received a notice this morning that mentioned your name in a pending legal matter. It doesn't accuse you of wrongdoing here, but given the nature of your role, we're obligated to—" I didn't flinch. "To sideline me," Lisa interjected. "Temporarily place you on paid administrative leave, effective immediately, just until things are clarified." I nodded once, not because I accepted it, but because I needed this moment to end. "We want to emphasize," Greg added, "that this is procedural, not punitive." I stood. "Of course. Thank you both." The air in the hallway felt colder than the room I'd just left. My heels echoed against the tile as I walked out, spine-rigid, eyes forward. But inside, everything cracked. I went home, dropped my purse, and sat in silence. No TV, no music. Just the rhythm of betrayal pounding behind my ribs. A notification lit up my screen. Brandon again. I let it ring out. I wasn't ready to talk. Not when the ground beneath me had shifted again. Not when silence for the first time felt like armor. Let's see how they react when I go silent. The storm arrived with no warning, just a flicker of the lights, a breathless hush, and then everything went black. My apartment, normally humming with background noise, surrendered to silence. I lit a candle on the kitchen counter. Its flame danced against the window pane like a restless truth begging to be seen. The knock startled me. 3 slow taps muffled by rain. When I opened the door, Brandon stood there soaked, clutching something under his coat. "You still read this one, right?" he asked, holding out a weathered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. I blinked. It was my mother's copy, the one with the underlined passages and coffee stains from a Thanksgiving long gone. He didn't step inside, just handed it to me like it weighed more than it should. "Check page 74, he said, then turned and walked back into the storm. I sat on the floor legs folded beneath me and opened the book. Wedged between the pages was a folded letter, yellowed but carefully creased. My name in her handwriting. My breath caught. "Claire," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means they're already rewriting what I tried to make right." I held my breath as her voice spilled across the page, each word a lifeline. "Gerald is not a cruel man, but he is weak, and weakness in the hands of someone like Vanessa becomes a weapon. I've seen how they talk around you, above you, through you. But you, my child, see through them." There was more. Tucked inside the letter was a small flash drive, sealed in a labeled envelope, "Will. Holographic backup." My hands trembled as I powered on my laptop, praying the battery would last. Candlelight flickered across the screen as I inserted the drive. The file opened to a scanned document. Elaine's handwriting filled the page, dated October 21st. Her signature was unmistakable, middle initial, sweeping, E, the familiar curl on the C of coal. No notary stamp, but the clarity, the tone, it screamed authenticity. My phone buzzed. Cynthia's voice crackled through the speaker. "Please tell me you're not calling to say you found more drama." "Something better," I said. "A handwritten will, signed, scanned, stored on a drive hidden in a book." Silence on the other end. "Then that signature is pure gold. If verified, this trumps anything they filed." We move tomorrow. I stared at the letter again. Elaine's closing lines unfurled like a bandage finally lifted from a wound. You were never the outsider. You were the heir. And if they try to erase that, let them choke on the ink. My chest tightened. It wasn't just proof. It was belief, her belief in me, preserved beyond breath. Just then, another knock. Brandon again, this time only half-drenched. I wanted you to see it first, he said, nodding toward the book. Mom never gave up on you. I didn't know until I found that tucked in her reading chest. But I think she meant for you too. You believe me now? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He looked away. I believe Mom did. That was enough for now. As he left, I stood by the window, the storm raging behind me, lightning crawling across the sky like a signature from the heavens. I held the letter close, the scanned will already uploading to Cynthia. Time to bring it all to light. I didn't bring anger to court. I brought a mother's voice and a forged will. The county courthouse stood like an old stone sentinel, cold and unflinching beneath the gray November sky. I pulled my coat tighter as I stepped through the metal detectors, the echo of my heels swallowed by marble and murmurs. Cynthia walked beside me, briefcase in one hand, unshakable resolve in the other. Courtroom 3B was already filling. Gerald sat on the left side with his attorney, a man who looked like he'd charge extra just to blink. Vanessa wore a fitted black dress with a silver brooch shaped like a dove. Irony came in brooches now, I guess. She didn't glance at me. Brandon sat 2 rows back by himself, his eyes fixed on the floor. All rise, the bailiff intoned. Judge Holloway stepped in like she owned the oxygen. Robe's crisp hair pulled into a severe bun. Her presence filled the room even before she spoke. We took our seats. The air tightened. Cynthia stood. Your Honor, the petitioner submits 2 key items into evidence: a notarized revision of the will of Elaine Cole, dated October 21st, and an audio file recorded by the decedent. The flash drive glinted in the light as she handed it to the court clerk. Everything about Cynthia was deliberate. Every pause, every syllable. She didn't argue. She informed. Gerald's attorney shot up. Objection. The audio is unauthenticated. No timestamp, no proof of chain of custody. Judge Holloway tilted her head. Noted. But admissible for preliminary hearing. Continue. The clerk inserted the drive into the system. A low click, a few seconds of static, and then Mom's voice. She is the one I trust. If they say otherwise, they're lying for themselves. My throat clenched. Her voice sounded like warmth in winter. The courtroom held its breath. For that moment, the marble walls and leather-bound law books faded, and it was just me and her again. Defended. Believed. The judge nodded. Once. Noted. Proceed. Cynthia placed a printed copy of the revised will on the evidence table. Notarized by Mark Delaney. Cross-referenced with his registry log. Verified date and witness signature. Vanessa whispered something to Gerald, her jaw tight. I caught her glance. There was something brittle behind it now. Gerald stood slowly. This is manufactured. That audio, desperation. Claire always needed to win. She edits, she twists, she creates fantasy. I didn't rise. I didn't speak. I just watched him try to paint over truth with sound bites. Cynthia didn't take the bait either. Your Honor, she said calmly, we're not asking for conclusions today. We're asking for verification through forensic signature analysis, audio authentication, and expert witness interviews. Judge Holloway shuffled the papers before her gaze, flicking between us. This court finds sufficient merit to escalate this case to full probate review. All relevant materials will be submitted to independent forensic experts. You have 3 days to deliver your exhibits for authentication. Next hearing is set for December 5th. Adjourned. The gavel hit, like a bell tolling for someone else's lies. Outside, the wind had sharpened. I stepped into it like armor. Brandon hovered near the steps, hesitant. I gave him a nod, then walked toward the sidewalk, heartbeat steady. Behind me, I heard the echo of heels Vanessa's. She matched my pace for a second. Then I turned and looked at her directly. No fear, no apology. only fire. You forged a will. I'm restoring one. Her mouth twitched. She said nothing, but the way her hand tightened on her purse strap told me I'd struck where it hurt. Lies age badly under oath. The air inside the hearing room wasn't just cold, it was clinical. No press, no murmurs from the gallery, just a sterile silence, broken only by the ticking of a wall clock and the scratch of pens over legal pads. Everything about this courtroom was smaller than the last, except the tension. It hung over us like a held breath. I sat beside Cynthia, my mother's gray coat wrapped tightly around me like armor. Vanessa wore cream, pretending innocence. Gerald, stoic as ever, leaned back in his chair like this was beneath him. But his crossed arms and darting eyes told a different story. Judge Holloway adjusted her glasses. We'll proceed with expert testimony. Mr. Liu, please approach. Mr. Liu moved with the precision of someone who understood the gravity of paper and ink. Compact, confident, he opened a thin black folder, revealing blown-up samples of Elaine's signatures over time. I've analyzed the signature in question, he said, gesturing to the screen. The one dated October 30th, 2023, used to validate the revised will. And your findings? Cynthia asked. The signature varies drastically in pressure consistency, stroke slant, and end flow curvature compared to verified samples from the decedent. In English, please, Judge Holloway said dryly. It's likely forged, Mr. Liu replied, calm as a scalpel. The decedent typically signed with her middle initial and used a looping terminal stroke. The document in question lacks both traits. Vanessa cleared her throat. My mother was weak. She could barely lift a spoon. Of course her signature looked different. Cynthia's voice remained even. Did she indicate that to the notary present? Did she require assistance? She said she didn't need to. Vanessa snapped. We just wanted her wishes documented. We? Cynthia asked, raising an eyebrow. Vanessa blinked, then shifted in her seat. She wanted to protect what little we had left. Before Cynthia could press further, I stood. Your Honor, I'd like to present a short video. Judge Holloway nodded. The screen flickered on. A hospital room. Soft lighting. Elaine, pale but alert, laughing at Brandon's off-color joke about hospital food. Then she reached for a clipboard and signed a form fluid, confident with her usual flourish of the middle initial. This was recorded 48 hours before she died, I said quietly. No trembling, no hesitation. Vanessa looked away. Gerald's jaw flexed, hands folded so tightly, his knuckles blanched. Mr. Liu stepped forward. This video corroborates my analysis. The signature filed on the will is inconsistent with known recent samples. Cynthia continued smoothly. And what of the notarized version from October 21st? Mr. Liu flipped to the next slide. That signature matches precisely with verified examples. Signed in the presence of Mark Delaney, a licensed notary. Vanessa's mask cracked. So what if I helped? She was going to leave everything to her. The words fell into the room like a dropped glass. Shards of confession. Gerald turned toward her slowly, his expression unreadable. Judge Holloway's gavel struck once. Sharp, final. We will reconvene tomorrow with intent to rule. No one moved. Even the air seemed frozen. Cynthia gathered her papers without looking at the other side. I stood slowly, resisting the urge to meet Gerald's eyes. But Vanessa? I looked straight at her. She flinched. Outside, the sky had shifted from steel to slate. The storm wasn't over, but the dam had cracked. A house built on forged ink cannot stand. Thanksgiving morning arrived with none of the comfort the calendar promised. No scent of roasted turkey, no clinking glassware. Just cold marble floors and the sharp click of shoes echoing through the courthouse as I walked with Cynthia to courtroom 4B. I wore black, not for mourning, but for resolve. Inside, tension was dressed in tailored suits. Gerald sat across from us, arms crossed, jaw locked. Vanessa shifted beside him, eyes rimmed with the kind of panic mascara couldn't hide. Brandon entered quietly, choosing a seat at the back. Not their bench, not mine. Just a middle distance, 1 foot still inside their story, 1 inch closer to truth. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses, flipping through documents like they weren't life-altering. This court has reviewed all evidence presented, including notarized documentation, audio files, hospital handwriting samples, and sworn testimonies. My heart beats slower than time itself. The will submitted by Gerald Cole on November 2nd has been ruled void. The judge continued, voice steady. The court finds it forged based on expert testimony. The October 21st will signed and notarized in the presence of Mark Delaney is hereby upheld. Vanessa sucked in air like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Gerald didn't flinch, he calcified. The court recognizes Claire Cole as the primary beneficiary to Elaine Cole's estate, effective immediately. Mr. Gerald Cole is removed as executor, and this matter will be forwarded to the district attorney's office for potential criminal inquiry. The gavel came down like thunder across a dry field. My fingers curled tightly around the edge of the bench. Not from shock, but from the effort of staying composed. Beside me, Cynthia whispered, "You held the line." When we stepped outside, the courthouse steps had turned into a media trench. A sea of lenses, microphones, and the blinding cadence of flashing bulbs. Gerald marched past them without a glance, jacket flapping face stone. But Vanessa turned, stepping into the chaos like it owed her sympathy. She manipulated Mom. She barked wild-eyed. She gaslighted her, pressured her into rewriting everything, some reporters murmured. One raised a mic toward me. I stayed silent until Vanessa's voice sharpened with venom. She doesn't deserve a dime of that estate. She's always been the black hole in this family, sucking everything into her misery. I didn't move toward her. I didn't raise my voice. I simply spoke into the storm. "You erased her?" I said loud enough for every microphone. I remembered her. A hush fell like a curtain. Even the camera clicks seemed to hesitate. Brandon stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly. He walked right past Gerald, past Vanessa. He stood beside me, hesitated only for a moment, then wrapped his arms around me like a brother who had finally chosen a side. "You were never crazy," he whispered so close the world could still hear. Just outnumbered. A knot unraveled in my chest, not because the cameras caught it, but because for the first time I wasn't standing alone. I looked at the crowd, not with triumph, but clarity. This wasn't about winning. It was about restoring something. They tried to edit out the truth of a daughter who had loved too quietly and a mother who had safeguarded that love with legal ink and encrypted hope. Vanessa screamed after us again, incoherent now. Reporters circled her like bloodhounds, but I kept walking. Camera flashes freeze the moment. Claire walks forward alone, but unafraid. Justice doesn't heal everything, but it stops the bleeding. The morning light crept through the blinds like an intruder who didn't know whether to offer warmth or warning. My apartment sat still, hushed in a kind of mourning I couldn't name. Part grief, part exhaustion, part something almost like peace. The silence didn't press in anymore. It rested. After everything, it was strange how anticlimactic justice could feel. But then again, Elaine always said, real change happens quietly. On the table next to a half-drunk cup of tea gone cold lay the thick envelope from Cynthia. I hadn't opened it last night. I'd wanted one more day untouched by paperwork. Now I peeled it open slowly, like it might bleed if I rushed. Inside were the formal rulings, court orders, and a personal note in Cynthia's bold, tight script, 60 days until full transfer. But you've already won the part that matters. Call me when you're ready. I set it down and stared at the wall. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt intact, and that was enough. Later that morning, I walked into my office building for the first time in 2 weeks. I wore black slacks, a gray blouse, and my mother's old silver brooch, the one she used to pin to her coat when she wanted to feel invincible. At the HR desk, they offered forced smiles and awkward coffee. My manager's voice was careful. "Claire, we apologize for the preemptive suspension. We've reviewed the situation. Your record will show no disciplinary action." I tilted my head. "That's generous, considering you didn't ask for my side before letting me walk out the door." She flushed. "We were under pressure from outside counsel, which is exactly why you'll need a stronger spine next time," I said gently. I'll return on Monday. My terms. My projects. As I left the building, a soft drizzle had started light cleansing. Charleston didn't roar with triumph. It just breathed, and I let myself breathe with it. Back home, Brandon was sitting outside my door balancing 2 lattes on his knee. He held up a manila envelope and gave me a small nod. "What's that?" I asked. He handed it to me without a word. Inside was a photograph Mom and I in the backyard, elbows deep in soil. I was maybe 10. She had one arm around me and her other hand holding a trowel mid-laugh. It wasn't posed. It was real. "She made me promise not to throw this away," he said, his voice tight. "Said I'd know when it mattered." "She knew they'd come for me," I murmured. "Brandon didn't deny it. But she also knew you'd stand." That evening, I sat with my laptop open and drafted a wire transfer of $50,000 to the Charleston Women's Shelter. I listed the donor as Elaine M. Cole. It wasn't for tax deduction. It wasn't optics. It was restoration. Mom believed in impact that didn't need to be seen to be felt. I wanted her name to keep moving forward, not be entombed in litigation papers. "She didn't just leave me money," I whispered aloud, staring at the cursor blinking in the confirmation box. "She left me voice." We went to visit her grave at sunset. No cameras, no court, no agenda. Just us. Me and Brandon carrying a small bouquet of marigolds and a note I'd written by hand. The headstone was simple, as she'd requested: Elaine Cole, beloved mother. Relentless heart. 1957-2023. I knelt and placed the envelope under a small, smooth stone beside the flowers. Inside it read, "I fought for you, and for me. I hope that echoes longer than silence." Brandon didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence, once passive, now felt like alignment. In the shifting light, I could feel something being released. Not pain exactly, but expectation. I didn't need to be understood by everyone. I just needed to know I hadn't betrayed myself. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A text from Cynthia Press wants your statement. What should I tell them? I stared out at the wet pavement glowing under the street lamps. My reflection in the car window wasn't the same woman who once begged her father to believe her. This version knew her worth even when others refused to see it. I opened my notes app and typed, "Tell them the truth didn't collapse. It just waited for someone to stay standing long enough." They once erased me with silence. I answered with a signature. The morning arrived without asking permission. Soft, golden sunlight crawled across the floorboards of the lakefront porch, filtered through branches, still damp from yesterday's rain. The coffee in my hand steamed upward in slow curls, like the breath of a new beginning. Everything was quiet, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that settles in after a war has ended, and all that's left are survivors breathing deeper than before. I sat on the creaking bench where Mom used to drink tea before chemo wore her bones thin. The air smelled of wet leaves and clean earth, the kind you can only find near water. My journal rested on my lap, its leather cover worn at the corners. I opened to a fresh page and pressed the pen down. "Dear Mom, I didn't fight for the money. I fought for your truth." The ink bled a little on the page, maybe from the cold, or maybe because some words cost more than others. I paused, my fingers trembling, just enough to remind me this wasn't easy, just necessary. They said I was dramatic, bitter, that I didn't let things go. Maybe they were right. But you taught me that silence isn't grace if it conceals injustice. You didn't raise me to be quiet when truth begs for a witness. A breeze stirred, lifting strands of my hair and rustling the oak leaves. I imagined her next to me, nodding as I wrote. The journal filled slowly, every line a release. You were the one person who saw me whole, even when I couldn't prove myself, even when I didn't fit. You knew the shape of my pain. And when they tried to erase you, I remembered you instead. I folded the letter carefully, crisp edge over edge, then placed it inside a weathered tin box I'd kept since college. It once held keepsakes. Now it would hold a promise. I tucked in a pressed marigold from the funeral bouquet, a photo of us in the garden, and the page I'd just written. Shoes off, I walked down to the old oak tree near the lake's edge. The earth here felt soft, forgiving. With bare hands, I dug a shallow pocket and buried the tin. Not as a secret, but as a root. Something meant to stay. As I dusted my palms, my phone buzzed from the porch. A message lit the screen, Celeste, Friendsgiving at mine. "You coming?" I read it twice. Not out of surprise, but disbelief that I could say yes without hesitation. Me wouldn't miss it. Inside, I washed my hands and zipped up the long navy coat Mom left me in her will. It still smelled faintly of her lavender sachets and worn paperbacks. I grabbed the pecan pie I'd baked the night before, slightly overbrowned on the edges, imperfect, but honest. I stood before the hallway mirror, the same one that once reflected a girl trying to be small enough to fit into other people's comfort zones. Derek's voice echoed in a memory, clear as glass, "You'll never fit in." But today, I didn't flinch. I met my own eyes and whispered, "Because I was never meant to." Outside, the wind shifted gently enough to stir the leaf litter beneath the oak. A single brown leaf floated free and twirled across the grass landing exactly where I'd pressed the tin into the soil, as if nature itself nodded in agreement. For a brief moment, a corner of the journal page peeked up from the earth just enough to catch the morning sun. Nov, 2023. For C. Then the wind laid another leaf across it, sealing it again. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I stepped onto the path, pie in hand coat hugging my shoulders, and walked toward a day that didn't ask me to shrink. For the first time in my life, I felt finished. Not broken, not unfinished. Just whole. I never wanted a war. I wanted answers. But when silence became the weapon used against me, I realized the truth had to be louder, stronger than their denial. If you've ever been pushed aside, labeled difficult, called dramatic for simply asking, "Why then?" maybe my story is yours too. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought to be heard. And if that speaks to you, I hope you'll stand with me. Not just for me, but for every daughter they tried to silence, every voice buried beneath polite lies. I wasn't the problem. I was the proof. And that proof needed someone brave enough to carry it even when it hurt. I chose to be that someone. If you see a piece of yourself in me, speak up. Let no one erase your name. To anyone still waiting for justice, I see you. Don't wait for others to believe you before you believe yourself. And when your truth feels like too much, remember too much is exactly what breaks silence. Let it. Let yourself be too much for the wrong people. Be just enough for you. And when they doubt your worth, do what I did, write your own ending. With your own name, in ink that doesn't fade.